Hello, welcome to day 471. We are now in our last month of 500 days with NTI. Can you believe it? If you're still here, I want to say congratulations. And of course, we're in Nti Revelation, which, as I mentioned last week, is pretty dramatic. One of the dramatic things that we looked at in the last week was that Leo video about lying. I think the name of the video was How You Lie. And, some of the ways that Leo spoke in that video were pretty dramatic. I agree with him in most of what he said. Some of it I would have said differently. A little bit of it I don't agree with. So let me start by talking about the Leo video. First of all, when he talks about how you lie, the way I would have worded that is how you rely on defense mechanisms. How you rely on defense mechanisms, which in effect is a kind of lie. But what we do is we rely on defense mechanisms in order to protect our little self, instead of letting it go and setting ourselves free. I remember many years ago at the beginning of my purification period, just before it started, actually, this was kind of the gateway into the purification period. I was soaking in the bathtub one day and I began to see a drawing. It was kind of like a vision. I began to see a drawing which showed my defense mechanisms. It's kind of funny because those defense mechanisms worked for me up until that day. As long as my defense mechanisms were unconscious, they worked. Once they were brought into awareness through that vision, they stopped working. The gig was up. And that's why my purification process started, because we can't experience our purification process as long as we're still exercising our defense mechanisms. Because again, it's the defense mechanisms that keep everything repressed, nicely, neatly hidden. When the defense mechanisms break down, then everything begins to come up and we go through the healing process that Nti Revelation is pointing to. There were a couple things that Leo said in that video that I didn't agree with enough that I want to address them. I hope I can bring them up in my mind now. One was about speaking honestly. I think it was like his third phase, maybe at the end of the video. Not that I'm encouraging you to lie, but I remember he got very dramatic. Like, not only do you tell your wife that you cheated on her, but you tell her you had, multiple orgasms and you were madly in love. And I don't remember his exact words, but I think being honest is very important. I think being self-honest is critically important. If you aren't self-honest, then you're not going to be able to heal. You also can't lie to someone out of a desire to protect yourself, because that, of course, is a defense mechanism. But we do still need to have compassion for others. I feel like, if you tell the wife, yes, I cheated on you and I'm very sorry, that's enough. You don't need to stab her by telling her about all the orgasms. Have compassion for her. So I agree with Leo that you do not want to lie in order to protect yourself. Because again, the defense mechanisms have to be let go if we're going to let all this stuff come up and be healed. But I do think that we sometimes need compassion for what the other may be able to hear. The other thing that Leo said that I didn't fully agree with, he talked about being at a table with a bunch of people, maybe having politician discussions about politicians, and somebody might bring up a particular candidate. And instead of saying, yeah, well, I just don't think he's ready, he was saying, go full out. Well, I think that guy's, a jerk or an asshole or whatever Leo said. I don't perceive that as honesty either. I perceive that as believing your opinions. You might remember back in Nti Luke, I think it was Nti Luke 6, could have been Nti Luke 12. But back in Nti Luke, we were told that whenever we felt an opinion, to not say anything, and instead to go and talk to Spirit about that opinion. But opinions actually puff up the ego. So the best way to be honest when it comes to opinions is not to blurt them out. The best way to be honest about opinions is to see it's only an opinion, to see it's part of the ego, to learn not to speak those opinions. And even when I started doing that, the ego somewhat attacked me by saying people were going to think I was boring, not being involved in discussions. I never once heard anybody say that. I think people like to talk. They like to share their opinions. They're not as interested in yours anyway, in most cases. So if you just learn not to speak, realize opinions are just the ego, that works out fine. But I do think the basic gist of what Leo was talking about in that video is very important. Again, as long as we're exercising our defense mechanisms, we are protecting ourselves. And what we really need to do is to start letting these defense mechanisms break down. And the best way I know to do that, because you can't see what you can't see. So the best way I know to do that is to pray, to give willingness to see your defense mechanisms, to give willingness to see what you're hiding for yourself, from yourself, and for yourself. Give willingness to see what you're hiding from yourself, for yourself. And trust that this process will be perfect for you. I'm reading a book by Bernadette Roberts where she talks about when she went through this dark night of the soul, which is the language, the title given to it by St. John of the Cross. And she says that for her, it was about 9 months long. For me, it was about 5 years. I think that we can pass through it at a pace that's just right for us. I had lots of breaks. I think I told you last week, trust building breaks in my process. So my path through it, even though it didn't always feel gentle, don't get me wrong, was probably somewhat gentle because I gave myself breaks. So trust that you will go through it at the rate and in the way that is perfect for you. There's nothing to fear. And in fact, we're going to look at some of the fear that Revelation talks about, but there really is no need to fear. With that said, let me go ahead and turn to some of the reading that we did in Nti Revelation this week. The first thing that we read this week was Nti Revelation Chapter 5. And the only thing I want to point out about Chapter 5 is some of the last few sentences. It's talking about glory, one heart and one glory. And it says, it praises within itself in gratitude and love this one heart and this one glory. This one heart and this one glory praises within itself in gratitude and love. And it is this praise that is extended within itself, without leaving itself, so that it seems to move and yet it goes nowhere. This is the glory and joy of heaven, and this is that which you are. Those words to me are a wonderful description. Having experienced this joy, it's a wonderful description, about as well as words can speak about it. And this is where we're headed, right? We pass through the darkness to the light. As Bernadette Roberts said, where there was pain, now there is peace. So it's important to keep this in mind as you go through the purification process. Keep your eyes on the open door. Keep your eyes on the goal. Realize, you're going through a tunnel to the light at the other end of the tunnel. I'm not going to share anything from Nti Revelation Chapter 6 because you listened to an audio about that. I just want to point out that, again, that first rider, the one that is focused on conquest, that's the true desire. And this true desire we want to keep in front of us all the time. That's the same as keeping the goal in mind, remembering what we're doing. That's so very important. Nti Revelation Chapter 7, speaking about the Bible at chapter 7, it says, the purpose of these verses is to again assure you that there is nothing to fear. The four angels who are holding back the winds represent the holding back of the end of perception. The end of perception is held back. It does not come to you to be looked at and let go until you are ready and call it forth in your mind. I want to emphasize that too. No one will go through the purification process before they're ready. I remember shortly after I had that vision of the drawing in the bathtub where I saw my individual defense mechanisms and then they just kind of collapsed. They ceased to work. The very first thing that started coming up for me was self-hatred. And it was very intense. It's almost like these glasses were put on my face where all of a sudden, when I looked out at the world, what I saw was everyone hating me. This, of course, these thoughts were what I had repressed, that people didn't like me. And now it was coming up, and it's how I was seen. At the same time, there was this knowledge that seemed to be right back here that I could hear that this was healing, and just let this come up, let this come up, let this come up. And I did. But I walked around for about 2 months. Everybody I talked to, this part of my mind is telling me they hate you. They've always hated you. They just couldn't, they can't hide it anymore, all this kind of stuff. And this part back here is saying, just breathe, just let this happen, let it come up. This is healing. But one thing I remember between this and this, there was still a little bit of a neutral mind. And in that neutral mind, I remember thinking, I'm grateful that nobody has to go through this before they're ready. I'm grateful that people have defense mechanisms so they can hide from themselves that which they don't want to see. So although I'm also grateful that my defense mechanisms were revealed and therefore ceased to work, so that I was able to go through this purification process, and I pray that for everyone when they're ready, I am also simultaneously grateful that no one will ever be forced through that process. And so that's what Nti Revelation Chapter 7, the first paragraph, is talking about. This won't start for you until you're ready, and you can have faith in that. And when it does start for you, it's because you are ready and you can have faith in that. Now, of course, chapter 7 is where we're looking at the 12 lessons that we learned in NTI that help us through this process. We've contemplated the first 3, so I'm just going to talk about the first 3 right now. The first one is you are innocent. It's important to trust this as you go through the process, because a part of what comes up is shame, self-hatred, unworthiness, guilt, all that kind of stuff is coming up. And the ego is saying things that I'm going to call, everything it's saying is a temptation to believe the emotions. Temptations to believe I'm guilty. Temptations to believe I'm unworthy. Temptations to believe I'm, as Dr. Hawkins says, the lowest worm on the earth. And what we need to hold on to in our soul is the truth is that we're innocent. That will be spoken, at least for me, the way I experienced it from back here. In NTI Acts, we were taught the difference between guilt and ignorance. Many of us, if not all of us, have done things in our lifetimes. They say everybody has skeletons in the closet, right? Which seem to be proof of our guilt. And there are things that seem to be proof of our unworthiness. But that's not what those things are. Anything that we have done, any thought that we have believed, was done or believed out of ignorance, out of not knowing who we were, out of believing the thoughts that showed up in the mind. It was all just ignorance. And as NTI Acts says, ignorance is not guilt. Ignorance is a call for knowledge. Knowledge being learning who we are. Learning we're the unaffected awareness. Learning we do not have to believe thoughts. Remember Jesus, when he hung on the cross, said, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." In that ignorance, we are innocent. Regardless of what we've done, regardless of what we've believed. When we're going through the purification process and all of this repressed self-hatred, shame, unworthiness, guilt starts coming up, we need to hold on to that truth. We were ignorant. And now we're going through this healing process so that we can know our true self. Number 2, you are the Son of God, and everything you experience is a gift to yourself. This is so true. I don't know how to explain it, how to put it into words, because I think until you see it for yourself, it doesn't seem true. But there will come a point where you will see that everything you have been through is something that you called for unconsciously at the spirit or the soul level, not the person, but the spirit or the soul level called this forth because all of this experience wanted to be experienced in exactly the way it happened. That's just a truth. And when you know it, you know it. When you see it, you see it. And until then, you don't. But you can at least intellectually remember that everything that's happening is a gift to me. You don't have to understand, but you can ask, because it's, again, it's called forth by your spirit, for lack of better words, not by the person, by beyond the person. And so you can ask within, what's the gift in this for me? How is this helpful for me? What can I learn from this? And when you ask within to that spirit, which has called all of this forth, it can also answer. And it can guide you through everything, through every gift, so that you see the gift in it. Number 3, you choose the purpose for everything you see, and the purpose you choose is the one that is given to it. This is built upon number 2. If I continue to say, I didn't choose this, I'm the victim of this, well, then that's how it's going to appear. I didn't want this. This isn't fair. This shouldn't have happened. That's the way it's going to appear. But if you choose that everything here is for my healing, for my awakening, to bring me home, however you want to word it. And if you're asking within, asking that spirit within, how is this helpful? Then that's how you'll see everything. That's completely up to you. So you choose the purpose for everything you see, and the purpose you choose is the one that is given to it. I'll look at these others after you've had a chance to contemplate them. For now, I just want to move over to Nti Revelation Chapter 8, which follows really well upon the last 2 lessons from Chapter 7 that I just spoke about. Revelation Chapter 8 says twice, all meaning comes from the mind. All meaning comes from the mind. Everything is actually neutral. Until we come to where we see with God's mind, and then we see the heart and the glory of everything. Everything is neutral. And we are applying the meaning to it. That's why we can apply the meaning, this is here for my healing, this is here for my awakening. Or we can apply the meaning, I'm the victim of this is unfair, this shouldn't have happened, she's a jerk, he's selfish. And again, we're going to experience our own meaning. It's really important to realize that we're the ones applying the meaning, and then we can choose to apply the meaning that is most helpful in the moment, instead of continuing to apply meanings that lead us to suffer to one degree or another. It says you have applied meaning and then denied that the meaning was given by you. So when we say certain things are wrong, certain people are guilty, certain people are jerks, we see that as a fact. It's a fact that that's wrong, that shouldn't happen. It's a fact that they're guilty. It's a fact that he's a jerk. And we deny that we're the ones applying the meaning on everything that's neutral. And in fact, at some point we'll go beyond neutrality and we'll see everything as heart and glory, or see everything as God. But now we need to get from what I think about it is true to realizing everything is neutral, and I can apply a more helpful meaning. This is here for my healing. This is here to help me see what's in my mind that I need to see. So you have applied meaning and then denied that the meaning was given by you. Another sentence. It is time to look within the mind at the beliefs you hold there. It's time to look in the mind. Every meaning you apply is pointing to something that you're holding on to here that you believe. Let's start looking at that. Let's start taking this house of cards down, a card at a time. You free yourself to look at the events associated with the 7th seal, that's just a reference to Revelation, and to ask, what meaning am I seeing in this? So I think he's a total jerk. I don't think he should have said that, blah, blah, blah. I bring that back to me. I ask, What in me do I need to see that is causing me to interpret him in that way? What beliefs are here? I often would start with, why is this upsetting me? I called this root cause inquiry, trying to get down to the root cause belief. Why am I so upset by what he did? Well, I felt ignored, not cared about, not respected, felt like he didn't care about me at all. So why does that bother me? You always have to keep bringing it back to yourself. So why does that bother me that he didn't care about me at all? Well, it says I'm not important. It says I don't matter. Why does that bother me? Why would it bother me? Why isn't there, there isn't a natural humility here that just says it's okay to not be important? Why? What is that? Why does it bother me that I am not important, that I don't matter? Because I think that's the truth. Now I'm down to the worm, right? That's the truth. I don't matter. Now what I'm looking at is a belief about myself. I'm looking at that unworthiness. And I went right through my defense mechanisms. My first defense mechanism was projecting that he was a jerk. I went past my defense mechanism, looked within, and now I'm to the repressed belief that I'm the unworthy worm. And now what do you do about that? You just start letting it come up. You move to the superconductor process, right? You don't do anything with that. We just want to uncover all this stuff and set it free. That's how we become free. So it is time to look within the mind at the beliefs you hold there. You free yourself to look at the events associated with the seventh seal and to ask, what meaning am I seeing in this? So when he said what he said, the meaning that I unconsciously applied was proof that I'm a lowly, unworthy worm. You see? And now I've seen that. I've seen the meaning that I applied. And now I can move into the rest, accept, and trust, or move into the superconductor process and set this free. Just let it rise up. Feel every bit of it. Do nothing and set it free. Nti Revelation Chapter 9. The abyss, this is a term from the Bible, is the recesses of your mind. We call that the subconscious, where you still hold to beliefs that you do not desire to hold to anymore. And when you enter into the purification process, when you're ready and you enter in, it is because you don't want these anymore. It is because your desire for freedom is greater than your desire for feeling good. You see, we use defense mechanisms to feel good. We repress, deny, project, etc. But at some point, we want true freedom more than feeling good. And that's when we get the courage and the willingness to pass through the darkness, to look at the recesses of the mind, to let the subconscious reveal itself. So the abyss is the recesses of your mind where you still hold to beliefs that you do not desire to hold anymore. It is important to go into the abyss and look for what is hiding there. When you're ready, this is important. This is the way. Now it says the smoke that rises out of the abyss is distraction. The smoke that rises out of the abyss can be the stories about what happened, the yada, 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 right? So we don't want to listen to those stories. That's just distraction. I don't want to believe he's a jerk because he said blah, 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 and he shouldn't have done that and blah, 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 blah. I don't want to believe all of that. That's going to distract me from healing. I want to stop the projection. Stop using whatever defense mechanisms I've used. Stop lying to protect myself, right? Stop all the defense mechanisms that I've used. Look within and see what those defense mechanisms are. Look beyond those defense mechanisms to the truth of what's been believed in my subconscious and allow it to rise up. There are a couple of retreats that I've developed, which are offered through Awakening Together with other facilitators, that could be very helpful to you in this process. One is called the Keys to the Kingdom, Freedom from the Ego. It teaches about all of the defense mechanisms and such. You can also learn about them if you want to by doing an internet search on defense mechanisms and look and see which ones you use. Another retreat that's really helpful is releasing the I am bad belief. And in that retreat, you also learn a lot of journaling techniques that you can use that will help get you underneath your defense mechanisms using inquiry and look at false beliefs. So again, those two retreats are the Keys to the Kingdom and Releasing the I am bad belief. I wrote them both. But remember, the smoke that rises out of the abyss, or the talking, the chattering, the story, that's just distraction. Don't look at that right now. We're looking past that to what's really going on with me. What are my defense mechanisms? What are my defense mechanisms hiding? Right? And then letting those rise up and become free. Fear can only hold you back if you choose to let it. If you choose, you can also walk right through fear. There is fear that rises up in the mind that tells us not to look in one way or another. It's like, the way it feels is, it's like what's going to happen if we look inside our subconscious. We let the subconscious come into consciousness. There's this belief that we're going to find out something so horrible about ourselves we can't bear to look at it. That's the real fear. And that's just not true. But that fear will keep people from looking. That fear keeps people using their defense mechanisms until they're ready to until they're ready to stop. It's that fear that something's so terrible here that I can't bear it. And that's not true. So when that fear starts rising up, just remember, this is a defense mechanism of the ego. This is the ego trying to keep me from looking at the subconscious and seeing that it's all just false beliefs and letting it all go and finally setting myself free. So fear can only hold you back if you choose to let it. If you choose to believe there's something in here so bad I can't bear it, you won't go look. But it's not true. There's nothing in there so bad you can't look at it. It's all untrue stuff that you have accidentally believed, meaning you've applied that was never true in the first place. All stuff you made up and then believed what you made up. Fear can only hold you back if you choose to let it. If you choose, you can also walk right through fear. Fear has not stopped you, so there can be nothing to fear. This is what you discover when you walk right through the fear and go ahead and look and allow the subconscious to be revealed. Fear has not stopped you, so there can be nothing to fear. It also says, in trust and peace, kneel down and let the guilt, or let the unworthiness, or the shame, or the hatred, or whatever you find in there. In trust and peace, kneel down and let it rise over you. That again is the superconductor process, or the rest, accept, and trust. That's what you use. That's what you do. It's more of a non-doing than a doing. People ask, what do I do with this once I uncover it? That's what you do. Rest, accept, and trust. Superconductor process. Kneel down in trust and peace and let it rise over you. More of a non-doing than a doing. If you do not call to it in faith, which means if you do not believe it, it'll pass you by. So when those feelings of guilt rise up, just don't believe I am guilty. When those feelings of self-hatred rise up, just don't believe I'm the worst thing that ever existed, right? Just let it rise up. Do nothing. You had an opportunity here. It was an optional assignment for you. Nti Revelation 8 again told us that all meaning comes from the mind, and you had an opportunity, if you wanted to read Revelation, the Bible, and see what meaning your mind was applying. I've made that an optional assignment because that works really well for some people and it doesn't work really well for others. There are people who were never taught Revelation, don't have any beliefs caught up in Revelation, and are unable to see it as just nothing. And so the assignment doesn't work. I, however, had been taught a lot about Revelation, especially during the years of my life when I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I was taught quite a bit about Revelation. So when I was the scribe of NTI and I read NTI Revelation, and I read Revelation in the Bible, Revelation 8, I could see this meaning that I had applied to it. And I was able to sit back and see that I applied that meaning. Let me just give you some examples of the meaning that I applied. I'm going to go to the Bible and just share a little bit of this with you. So in the Bible at Revelation 8, it says when he, which I think is Jesus, when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. What my mind applied to that when I read this as the scribe of NTI was kind of like, oh shit, something really bad's going to come. It doesn't say this. It just says when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Why didn't I see that as a devotional silence? Right? I didn't. My mind applied, oh shit, something bad is going to happen here. It talked about an angel who had a golden censer who came and stood at the altar. There was this hope that if an angel is coming and staying at the altar, maybe bad things won't have to happen. That was what my mind said. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all God's people on the golden altar in front of the throne. The smoke of the incense together with the prayer of God's people. Oh, good, maybe it's going to be okay. Maybe everything's going to be okay. The smoke of the incense together with the prayers of God's people went up before God from the angel's hand. Oh shit. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar and hurled it to the earth. Oh no, 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 now the bad stuff is going to happen. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, earth. Oh no, I'm going to die. Oh no, this is awful, right? My mind applied all of this meaning to these words. And then as it continued and I began to read about all the things about the hail and fire mixed with blood and a huge mountain ablaze thrown into the sea, and a star fell from the sky, and a third of the rivers and the waters were dried up and turned bitter is what happened, turned bitter, and many people died, and read all this stuff. Then I started, instead of fear, I shifted to anger, which we know is a defense mechanism. And I began to be angry at God. How could God be so cruel? How could God be so unloving? You see, my mind's doing all of this. My mind's doing all of this. We apply the meaning to what we experience. And in fact, what's going to happen next week is you're going to have an opportunity to read Revelation if you want to. It's an optional assignment. But to say a prayer first and to ask, let the right mind apply some meaning to these words. What does the right mind see in this? And maybe see a completely different kind of interpretation. And again, what these two exercises emphasize, the one in Revelation 8 and the one in Revelation 10, if the exercises work for you, is that different meanings can be applied to the same thing. Therefore, meaning is not inherent in anything. There are unhelpful meanings which keep us believing in the world and the self and in grievances and keep our defense mechanisms in place, et cetera, et cetera. And there are helpful meanings which point away from the world toward truth, help us to let go of our defense mechanisms and our false beliefs. But there's no truth in meaning. Truth is beyond all of these meanings. So with that said, we look ahead to the next week where you're going to continue reading from NTI. You'll continue to contemplate one lesson a day from NTI Revelation 7. You'll continue the awareness, watching awareness practice. And your weekend assignment is going to be a weekly gathering that I led called When the Ego Gets Vicious. I thought that was very appropriate for Revelation. So you'll watch that video this weekend. And then again, we're in our last month, our last month of the 500 days. So I will see you again next week. Have a wonderful week with Revelation. Don't forget to pray. It's a wonderful time for prayer. What can I see? How can I know you? What's best for me now? What can I learn from this? What meaning am I applying? How am I defending myself? How can I increase my willingness? Whatever prayers feel right for you, it's a wonderful time for prayer. Bye.